Welcome to the Smoke and Rope Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Basor, and today is episode 79. We are fast approaching that century mark that we're shooting for. So real excited to have today on the show my good buddy Jason Crockett from the THCBD source. Jason, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me, brother.
You got it. Most of Michigan knows just as Crockett. So for people that didn't know as Jason's first name, it's Jason. So, and then Tom over at Real Leaf today. Love you working from home and then smoking and the beautiful design going on behind your head. What's happening?
The Vortex. Oh man,
Yes.
Just here hanging out with Jason, man. He's here at the homestead, and we're just shooting the shit, talking about cannabis like we always do.
Oh, sweet. And Kevin might be joining us here today. He's having a little bit of internet issues, but get into it a little bit. Today we're going to talk a lot about the market, Michigan market, and Jason, or Crockett, I'm going to call you Crockett from here on out, Jason, has a unique perspective from the Colorado market and the Michigan. And I first met Crockett out. It was a tour in early 17. I think it was early 17, late 16. I was out in Colorado, went out with some friends, and we were going to go out and use a service that we had told about through a friend, and we called Goldie. And we got to tour some grows and some processing and some stores and a testing lab out there. And we went to Crockett's OG Medicinals, and he was from Michigan, from Detroit. And that was the first time we met. And Crockett came back to Michigan and kind of linked back up and reached out, and we worked together on some stuff and actually made some money together. Thank you. That was awesome. Just have had a really good business relationship, and as a friend, I like Crockett, and I like to hear what he's got to say. So with that, I'd like you to kind of give more of the background of you grew up in Michigan, went out to Colorado, and then came back, and what are some of your qualifications, what you're doing now, and then we can get right into the market.
Yeah, killer. I mean, I think Tom was with you on that trip too to Michigan, so that was
Not that one.
Two separate trips.
Tom was on the second trip.
Derek
I smoked a lot of weed when I was there, and I've smoked a lot since, so everything kind of blends together. But yeah, I've been in the legal cannabis market. I mean, I guess the legal cannabis market was about 12 years now. I started when Michigan decided to become legal, and I had a couple buddies that I coached in business that, wanted some advice, and I started giving them advice, and they wanted an investor. And I said, instead of me being an investor, let's jump into it. I never was in the cannabis industry. I always liked cannabis younger, but it was very taboo, if you remember back then. So I kind of steered away from it for a little while. But the bottom line is, that got me going. We had the 5x72 plant count grow in Clawson. I had about 150, patients that would come in. We did parties. We, gave them their free ounce every month, the whole game back then. And
Yep.
I had a music studio in the back, and we threw ravers and, eating edibles all day. And, and honestly, I have zero pictures from then. Like, I don't know what it is, but like 12 years ago, people just weren't snapping all the time. They weren't doing Instagram. That's how quick time has flown. But I have zero pictures from then. It's so bizarre.
You get busted for that back then.
Yeah, dude, that's true. That's why we didn't have pictures.
Yeah, you get punched if you start taking pictures. Who's
That's
this
right.
cop?
It's like, holy shit. They just take your phone. But so and that's the whole thing. The police, and it got really crazy, and we didn't. I didn't get busted or anything, but it wasn't fun. I have a wife and kids. I live in a nice neighborhood. I just got really afraid, and so I packed up my bags. Me and my partner, we had built a hydro store and a grow store in Keego Harbor, and then we just decided to go to Colorado and see what we could do, because we wanted to be legal. We just wanted to do it right. And we stumbled across the 40,000 square foot building. We were the first vertical rack grow in Denver. So it was static racking, but it was the first vertical rack out there. And, we built it really cheap, and we got that thing up for $175 a square foot. I mean, we really did a great job, kept it nice and cheap. And you don't need to build a spaceship to have great product anyway. So we built it right. You do great weed. We actually had, we were pulling about 250 pounds a week. We were growing 30 strains. We had the highest tester in the state for like 6 months. Our Sensi Star got up to 38%. Our GMO, we were the first ones to bring in GMO. We had it at 36%. So of the 30 strains we were growing, 20 of them tested from 28 to 38%. But a lot of that's due to the climate out there too. It's a lot drier. There was no moisture level, so you lessen the moisture in your product when you're doing testing. You're going to definitely get higher potencies. So I mean, it's a little skewed. And the beauty out there too is you could actually take from the bud. That the smaller buds underneath the cola are your more potent buds. So I was actually able to take those buds, put them to the side, dry them, like do them in a dryer where you do food drying. And I was able to get it so dry that it was perfect. And then they would come hermetically sealed container, take it, test it. And in 3 days, my potencies were off the charts. But we can't do that here. So, but
were you the originator of the Viridis method?
We were not, but we watched them when they started, because those 3 Alive boys were out there and they were running their technique. So we did try it when it first started. So it's very interesting. We were still just old school basement boys that just kind of ran into this monster facility, and we just learned on the go. Everything we did, down to every room. If you built a grow, Tom, it's like you start with this room, and then we go to this room. We know we got to do this room, and we're like racking our brains. Like, we're going to be harvesting in a month. This room needs to go up. So we just learned everything on the fly, and we did a great job with it. And the proof was in the pudding.
So when did you come back? What made you come back to Michigan, and what have you been doing since you've been in Michigan?
Yeah, so we're from Michigan. I had young kids. Being out in Colorado was great. Making money's great, but I wanted to be by family, and I had a couple other business ideas. So I had parted ways with my partners, came back to Michigan, and decided to build. I took some ideas from Colorado. I sold everything. I didn't need any sales guys, so I sold everything on the shelves. And I had some brokers out there that would come to me, and these guys were old school Colorado boys, been there for a minute. And, they were coming to me and they were like, wait, what's your menu this week? What's your menu? And I'd be like, I didn't have anything, but eventually I started having stuff, and it really worked out well. They were like putting together deals where this guy wants 20 pounds a week every week for so long. And, it was really awesome. And then, I kind of saw what they did right and some of the things they did wrong. And I was, I'm a really good sales guy. So it was like, I came back here and I told my wife, I said, hey, I'm going to start this brokerage, and this is what I want to do. I want to bring the knowledge I have in Colorado and the stuff I've learned. And I want to be able to move product for not just one company, me stuck in a shell. I wanted to be able to sell for multiple companies. So at this point, I have 36 companies that I sell for that are under contract. I have 6 sales guys, and we just do really well. But I also have a couple other things. I have shares in an outdoor grow and an extraction lab and stuff like that. But bottom line, that's what I do. So I'm in the market every day. We did incredible numbers this year, and I guess I'm here to really answer any questions. I do a lot of meetings. I'm in probably 6 grows a week. Either consulting, or looking at their harvests, or bringing people in, like doing licensing deals with people. So I'm really kind of everywhere. Like right now I'm in Kalkaska. It took me 3 hours. And then I'll be in the UP tomorrow. So.
Oh, sweet. Yeah. Well, loving the UP. But yeah, beautiful that time of year. Awesome. Thanks for that info, Crockett. And I know go ahead and let Tom start it off.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, man, I did the same thing that Ryan did with Goldie and my first actual commercial facility tours, and that's when I met you. And it was really like the crux of where I decided I can actually do this. I can scale up. If I was like, if these guys can do it, I mean, we can do it. And no, but your crew was awesome though. Everyone is kicking ass. The plants look really, happy and healthy. And, really that was a big thing for me to actually get, to grow a pair enough to say, I can just scale up and try this whole thing out. So I do appreciate that. But you also been a great wealth of knowledge throughout the process. How do you see things with how things have evolved in Colorado versus Michigan? Like warning signs? We've got some things we need to be keeping an eye out for. What things should we be looking at for changing? What's your opinion on?
Well, that's a lot of questions, and I can actually answer every single one of them. But where do we start? So, Colorado's just light years ahead of us, right? You have a more medical-minded community. They actually are a little more health conscious out there. It's just a different thing. So the knowledge that I learned on the market out there is going to take us time as a community here to really understand that next level. And I'll just give you one example, right? When you do ratioed products like 3-to-1s, 2-to-1s, 1-to-1s, even 8-to-1 CBD to THC products, they're literally the best products on the market. And anyone who tries them and anyone who grows it and anyone who does it can vouch for it. But selling that to a patient coming into a store, hey man, this is 2 parts to 1 CBD to THC, they just don't get it, and it's going to take a long time for these guys to be able to bridge those type of that type of mindset, because everyone's just looking at potencies right now. Everyone's looking at prices right now. It's still a heavy flower market. What are we at? Like 60-70% still of the sales are flower, whereas Colorado was 80-20 from concentrates to flower when I left. So, you're just more educated. So I have faith. I believe we'll get here. And I mean, I talk to business owners every day and we have the same conversations. They wish they could, like example, like a guy would go, man, I want to launch this thing and this thing's going to be great. And I said, well, listen, if you launch that, you're not going to sell as much as you think. If you had 10 SKUs and that was your one hard SKU that you love, that's probably going to sell one to if you're making distillate cartridges, you're going to sell 1,000 distillate cartridges and sell 20 live resin, full rosin press, crystal, whatever the heck you're doing. It's just, people just are uneducated. So it's going to take a little while,
That's actually, want to follow up, because I had somebody ask me last week, family member, hey, well, what's the one thing that you, I guess, have a hard time with or surprised, now that we're here with this market or that you don't like? And I tell people, like, 12 years ago in my dispensary on Michigan Avenue, like the customer base was so much more educated than it is now. It was THC didn't even come up. It was all about, we were terpenes, cannabinoids. It was all that. It was medicine. RSO was huge. We had 3-to-1, 2-to-1, 1-to-1. I mean, and that's what people wanted. So I hear you on that. We used to be like that, but it's gotten so fast. And I've kind of seen on the border towns, which I love to sell on, they're even farther behind, obviously, because it's, Indiana, you can't be out in the open and learn about marijuana as much, in Wisconsin. So good point on that, and you're right. But my question would be is, last year, we felt Croptober. And there was a lot of reasons it was so harsh, and then it was almost like the faucet turned back on again right around end of February, beginning of March, and we were off. However, what are you feeling like for this year? Obviously, there's way more flower on the market, but then there's our sales our state sales are way up too.
So which part do you want me to answer? The Croptober answer and then the flower sales. So the Croptober answer would be, so, it's very interesting, and nothing but love to my extractor brothers out there, but, it's a feeding frenzy for them on some of these Croptober guys, because that stuff really doesn't affect flower sales as much. It's just biomass, right? So that biomass is extremely important for our system to get rolling. And this is the first year you're really seeing real biomass from Michigan. Because last year, what people got in late, there wasn't big outdoor stuff. Outdoor biomass last year was very slim. But this year, I supplied about 60,000 plants this year. I saw places that had 12,000 plants and 10,000 plants and 4,000 plants, and some of those big boys like down southwest have like 100,000 plants and stuff like that. So all I really am saying is I hope that we can sustain our own oil production for the next 10 years, because you saw a lot of oil coming in from out of state. You saw a lot of stuff being skirted through the system, and it was really unfortunate because it drove down prices to good people that really did a lot of hard work. I'm a slight share partner in an outdoor grow, and I was there once a week. It's hard work, and for these guys to do stuff like that was just really unfair. But money's money, right? So which I don't agree with. I love the game, the money comes, but the point I'm making is, going forward, as our outdoor grows, we should be able to supply ourselves and supply our own oil. We should actually have a good track record. We'll be able to understand the numbers of what we need to produce enough oil for the upcoming year, right? You want to produce it all, and then you want to drip it out, and then until the next year, and then be able to do it again and keep on cycling that. So instead of everyone just having all this oil and dumping it, because oil prices right now are 6,500, right? I have some boys who are selling 6,500. I have some guys at 8,500, but 8,500 is still low. It should be 10, 12. And I get it for cart guys and stuff that want to make money, but it's like, there's still cost to do business. And, what is out West? I mean, they're at 39, 45, they're still cheap. And I guess long short of it, I think we're in a good spot. And I think this next season is going to be even way better.
What do you, when do you think we'll come out of the Crocktober as far as
Crocktober?
The Crocktober, that's the new thing, yeah. Oh man, I'd have to patent that, trademark that. So when do you think we're going to come out of that? I know as abruptly as it started last year, it went back the other way. Like we talk about in Michigan, if you take a vacation for a week or two at the wrong time, you missed out on a lot. And it was about end of February, March. You got any guess on when all of a sudden it goes up where, there's, the people that sell cannabis like a commodity are going to be raising their prices again?
Yeah. So however many people are listening and watching, this game's been going on for a while at the caregiver level to this level. Every time this year, it's always low, really good product. A lot of it's easier to grow. Climates are better for indoor growing. So it's just like this every year. I almost say just take a vacation December, January if you can do it. Stop your cycles in July so you can miss a couple harvests and go on vacation. But I think we're going to start coming out of it here in the next 2 months. I mean, it's going to be every spring. I know people that are still sitting on thousands of pounds of biomass, and I know people that have trailers sitting on their lots of fresh frozen, just sitting there waiting. Everyone's trying to do splits. No one wants to buy anything. It's just the way the market is. But if you guys know from last summer, it was a feeding frenzy. What can you find me? What can you get? I need this, get that. And I'm hunting and hunting. So, that's why I said before, if we can sustain ourselves, all these guys that did those freezers and did those freezer trailers and did their oil, we shouldn't have that feeding frenzy. We should always be supplying ourselves through those outdoor grows. So as long as these people are patient, they start making money because, you're doing a lot of output as these outdoor grows. They're not making any money. They're spending every month. What, it could be 50 grand a month. I don't know. But the point is that has to come from somewhere. So as long as these grows get up and everything is moving properly, they should be able to sustain, and we should probably never have a shortage. So this year, we're going to get out of it, and then I say by next year, it's going to be really clean. So in about 2 months, you'll start seeing everything start to spike back up.
Hey, Jason, it's Kevin Pybus over at True Cannabis. I've actually met you on the phone with John. We spoke a little bit ago about some product. And so it's nice to actually see you and meet you in person. Appreciate you coming on the show. I did have a comment going back to you talking about Colorado and comparing it to Michigan. I did live in Colorado for 13 years and moved back here in 2014. So kind of similar story to your situation. But the one thing I did notice in Colorado quite right away was that there is a lot more money in Colorado. And so when I would go out to eat with my friends here, you know, it would be like fighting, you know, for the last dollar to pay the tip. When I got out there, it was like people were fighting, throwing their credit card out, who's going to pay, like voluntarily. You know, it was just a weird situation. But with that all being said, you know, you see in communities where there's less money and people eat less, they eat less healthy. They eat cheaper food, things like that. You were mentioning Colorado at 80% concentrates at this point. Do you think that has a direct effect on there being more money in Colorado, that people have that to spend the extra to buy something that's more expensive? And do you think that will convert over here in Michigan, or do you think flower will always be something in Michigan because there's a little bit less money and we're a little bit more blue collar than Colorado is?
Well, you know, honestly, yeah, and Kevin, it really is nice to, you know, meet you face to face, kind of electronically as well. Thank you. Yep. Colorado's different, right? It's very transient. You have how many people come there? Thousands of people a week just come there just for hiking and biking and skiing. So that's something we just don't have here, right? And if you're going to Colorado to go skiing for a week, you got to have a little bit of money. So yes, the money there is not always just by the people who live there. It's just they have so many visitors, right? Their population there is a third of ours, but the amount of people that come there on a timely basis is like triple ours in a month. So it's like it's just a whole different world. So like, think about it. When you go on vacation and you go somewhere, you don't mind spending a little bit more money because you're on vacation. People just do it. I had this $2,000 allotted for the thing. I'm going to buy it, right? It's just a mindset. And yes, you know, it is a very affluent, very expensive place. I mean, I was renting a house and it was $3,800 for almost 2,000 square feet. I mean, I wanted to buy a house like the one I have here. It would have been $2.5 million. I mean, it was ridiculous. So yes, I mean, that does make sense. I never really thought of it that way. You know, you have more money, you buy more expensive things, and then they become a little bit more educated. And with more money becomes, you know, it's not all the time, but it becomes with more educated people too. So the more educated people that are making more money really look at things a little different. Like you said, you know, people that are less income, not that they're not smart, but they're not as educated in markets. So they are just looking for the least expensive thing. Maybe they don't, you know, they're just trying to smoke weed, you know, they're not going, I need a 3-to-1, you know, you're correct. You know, that's why pre-rolls here are just nuts. You know, that was the craziest thing coming back. I'm like, two things. I came back to Michigan. I go, distillate? People are actually buying distillate? It was the craziest thing I ever heard, because distillate was the last thing you did in Colorado. It wasn't the first thing. It was like, oh shit, I got to turn this into distillate. You know, but distillate here is like the most amazing. It's gold. And then pre-rolls, there were like Willie Nelson, there was Jane West, there was, you know, a couple different pre-roll brands, but that was the only pre-rolls I saw, because the bud tenders were making the pre-rolls from the bottoms of the jars at the end of the day. It was very rare that people made pre-rolls out of their own building. So that I guess goes to what you're saying, that it's a little more affordable. You know, pre-rolls are easy, $3, $5, you know, go to a dispensary, get a $6 pre-roll. So I think, you know, this market is going to be like that for a while, I would assume. What's our biggest market? Detroit, you know, so I get it.
I wanted to ask you about what's happening now. Is like, we discuss this quite often about this whole, you know, kind of a race to the bottom, or possibly just more of a separation between classes and levels of grades of flower on the market right now. Where do you see things? I mean, right, it seems like everyone's selling, prices are going down. Where do you see this thing kind of leveling out, in your opinion?
Yeah, so we are very fortunate here in Michigan. We have some of the best product in the country. I mean, you go all over. Colorado's weed is shit, dude. I mean, even though our stuff was great, you know, by the time it got through the transport, got to the place, got on the shelf, and got into their hands, it was dust, you know, so the weed just was not good. And I think that goes back to your other question. That's probably why concentrates are a lot better there too, because the weed really was not that great. So we're in an interesting spot here, because everyone grows really good weed. And the difference between someone's like Tom's, you know, like yours is, you know, pretty high. Like I have 3 grows that are like at that echelon that you're in, and it's very hard to get there. But the difference between you and someone just right below you is like, you're going from like I would say like an 8.5 to 8.75 to like 9.25. I mean, the difference is not that much, but it's noticeable to the keen eye.
I agree with that.
So even the stuff that's mediocre is still freaking better than most places in the country. So it's going to be interesting. I think people that run these grows need to really do their math and get their cost down per pound. If you can get your cost down per pound around $500 cost with everything, your rent, your gloves, your nutrients, your electrical bills, everything, you get your cost down, $1,000 pound is reasonable. You don't have to sell a $2,000 pound to be profitable in this game. Everyone's so used to $2,000, $3,000 pounds. I think people really need to look at their grow, understand their numbers, price accordingly, and don't be greedy, and you'll have a wonderful business. And I think once that happens, and it takes time for that type of data, right? You may only have 4 harvests. You don't have this data, but once you get that data and you really look at your numbers, I really believe that the really good stuff will sell higher, and the really low stuff will sell more and less. So I hope that answers your question, my brother.
That was good. I got a follow up to that because you sparked a couple things that I talk about, and I act like I know what I'm saying, but maybe I don't. So I'm gonna run it by you. In Colorado, it went from caregiver to the regulated pretty quick. It wasn't a lot of years in between. And then Michigan, it took forever, so there was a different base. And then the consolidation kind of happened up in Colorado, like where some of the bigger companies came in and bought up more, and a lot of some of the smaller original guys sold, is what I've heard. And then that brings to the point like a Live Well being really successful out there. And their model is in Illinois, it works, and in Pennsylvania and Florida, it works where you grow as much weed as possible and you remediate it before you send it to testing, and then you have it, and then you sell it, and it can be pretty high in THC, but it's not very good. And then they're looking to be the lowest. They fluctuate, but then they're the lowest in the market. So there's from in Michigan they're doing that, but like there's growers out there that are pretty much almost debt free. Their cost per pound is low, 400, 350, and they don't remediate. So I feel like they're kind of running into a different thing here where there's these, the little guy that's super agile and has done everything themselves, like Kevin and Tom. Maybe it's a little bit different, and it might be a little struggle. What is that accurate, or tell me I'm wrong? Or
well, Live Well is a different beast, right? We can't compare to that. Live Well, and they love it. And this is not a slight to Live Well. I'm not here to slight anyone. I think everyone's business is amazing, and everyone has a different game plan. And God bless everyone for doing the way they want to do it. But they have more of your Walmart model. They grow stuff cheap. They sell it cheap. They sell a ton of it, and that's their model. The only thing I didn't like about groups like that is a lot of times they do things to, adjust the market, right? They'll hold product and then they'll dump it onto the market, and then they'll adjust pricing in their favor. Like that happened to me when I was in Colorado. So when we came out, prices were at $1,800, and that was really good. But by the time we had our first harvest, Live Well, they put out, I don't even remember the number. This was years ago, but they put out enough that my prices went from $1,800 to $1,200 within a month, and we couldn't compete. The $100 ounces started to come to the table, and it was just something no one had ever seen. Now they've built an amazing company. I think it's a family business, and it's not a bad model. It's just, look at any party store, look at any bar, look at anything, the cheapest stuff sells the most. It just really does. And the highest end stuff just doesn't. But, you need both of those classifications. And I don't know what else to say about that.
Well, one would like to think in a more mature market that things actually do settle into, everyone settles into a lane. There's grades of quality that are obvious to most people. Once you start getting into cannabis, you can set it next to each other, you can look at it, you smoke it, smell it, and that's just as long as just the whole party store model with they're going to sell a ton of natty light all day long, and that's great for people that like natty light. but it's when people are not playing in the same, and everyone's trying to compare, peaches to apples, and, it's just impossible. And hopefully people are, starting to see, what's out there. But the problem with this mass produced flower is just making sure that we are identifying remediated products before it hits the market. If we're talking about health issues and stuff like that, is that something people did out west as much? I'm sure, but because of the environment being drier in Michigan, we have just such a, high humidity load and water load in the state that we have to handle. Was that remediation? Was that even something that they're doing or even talking about up there?
Yeah, remediation, and interestingly enough, when I was there, a lot of the rules were changing, and a lot of, because every week our compliance label changed. So the growing there was pretty insane. But honestly, no one remediated there. What they did, because even since I've been back here, is really remediation started. People are turning their stuff into hay. Now they actually have good rad source machines, and the product is sometimes a little better, but. The point is I didn't see any of that there. It's like you tested it, it failed, you had one more test, and if it failed, you had to kill it. There was, and before they didn't have any of that. Yeah, I think if you failed a test, it was like you had to get rid of it. Luckily, we didn't fail any tests, so I never had to deal with that in Denver. But honestly, remediation was something I just started seeing here. I had never seen it. And Tom, you're right. We have a different climate. We have a lot more moisture. We have a lot more microbials. I think in Denver, since there is no moisture and the air is very thin, molds and stuff don't stick to surfaces like they do here. And what we had mostly there was PM, because the PM floated through the air, and it would always get in through your vents, and it would get in through, because if I was in a lane, because I was over off Peoria, I had, Mary's Medicinals was my neighbor, I was over right in that area. Clinic was back there. So, I had all these monster facilities, but everything that went into the air went into our ducts and into our system. So we were constantly battling PM, but you don't fail for PM. But, so we weren't failing tests, but we battled hard. Our preventative maintenance SOPs were through the roof, so.
Go ahead, Kevin. You're mute.
Kevin, you're muted, brother.
Oh, sorry about that, guys. Just a comment about what you asked, Tom. When I was out in Colorado, and from what I've heard from people that still operate out in Colorado, it's not the same testing. They don't come out the lab and randomly select. You actually, from what I understand, turn in your samples, and that's where I heard of people soaking their weed in alcohol and then letting the alcohol boil off and then submitting it so they didn't have microbials. I've heard of actually people growing weed at their house and bringing that into their facility and submitting that as the tested product to cover the stuff that's at the lab because they can't get, or at the commercial grow because they can't get their commercial stuff to pass. And then there's also, from what I understand, there's the GMP where some people only have to test once a year. So it's not like every crop like we have and randomized samples and things like that. So I just wanted
that's
to add
nutty.
that.
And that was like that loophole has not been closed as of today. Does anyone know? That's insane that's allowed to happen.
Jason might have more on that. I don't
Are you
know.
talking about, becoming process validated?
Yes.
No, well, I'm actually talking about the randomization of sampling to get a true sample of what going out to market versus allowing somebody to cherry pick and also, do things to the product, in order to skirt the system, so to speak, and completely making the whole process of testing devoid. You know what I mean? I guess, is that something that's still you're allowed to send in? We'll have our fact checkers look into it, and we'll get back to you next episode and move on. How about that?
Well, when it comes to testing, if you're an honest business owner, you're going to do it the right way. And if you're going to be dishonest, you're going to do things the wrong way. The MRA out there was very, very strict. And if they caught any wind of you doing something, here they don't watch us like they did there. We had random people. We had people come with badges once a month, and they would check you. And if you didn't have a badge on, they would fine you. So it was very strict there. So a lot of people didn't skirt the system. There were ways, we're from Detroit. The minute we went there, we looked at all the rules. We're like, oh, there's ways to cheat, but you just don't, But the testing there was just way better. If you did it right, like I said, you pull the proper buds, you dry them properly. What was really nice about it, say we harvest, because we harvest on Monday. We would take the buds off, is exactly what we needed from that harvest. And by the time it was dry the next Monday, all our testing was back. So we were always selling exactly what we harvested. So here in Michigan, the process takes so long that a lot of times you're keeping 2 and 3 harvests in your backlog because you're always 3 weeks in arrearage in your product because of the way the testing is here. So I really believe if you do it right, then you should be able to test. By the time your stuff is dried and trimmed and everything, your test should all be back and you should be able to sell it instantly, because storage here is an issue for a lot of places. So, once again, guys like Tom and other guys that we work with, we're very picky on who we work with. They're very strict, and that's one of the key things we really like for people. I believe that the good people will do it the right way, and they should release it and make it a little better on testing, because I think testing here is probably the most worst ran portion of this whole business.
Agreed.
Well, Jason, if I'm not mistaken as well, the MRA out in Colorado has access to your cameras at all times, correct? Where we don't have that here?
No, they don't have access to it. They would have to request access, and then they had the same 40-day DVR backup. I think it was 45 days here. I think it's 30 days here. It was 45 days there. So you would just have to, when they came in, they were like, pull up, look on a calendar at this time, and you would have to pull up that time. But, if you're not speeding, you're not going to get pulled over for speeding. So we had no problem, with any of that. So even with the metric tagging, all that stuff, you can go outside your building and ping, how many plants you have in there, how many tags you have in there. That's what the RFID code is on there. So really everything, they would have to physically come and look at your data.
Hey, Jason, Crockett.
That's all right, brother.
So if we have a lot of the people that listen to the show are in the industry and are different license holders, and that's just really our target market. And what as far as like if somebody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to get a hold of you, and who are you kind of looking to meet if it's something like that?
Yeah, I mean, you can email me, would probably be the easiest way. It's Crockett, Crockett, like you see, at THCBD Source. If you look at my name moniker, it's pretty much Crockett at THCBDsource.com. Honestly, what I'm looking to meet is just good, like-minded people. All I do is bridge gaps between companies and finding the right company to fit with the other right company. Like, that's one of the reasons I'm out here. I've got a really amazing group, Dune Grass, out here that does a wonderful job up north, and Tom is the best. So he's up here doing his thing up north, and I thought it was a great relationship for them to work together instead of really selling their stuff all over the state. Let's keep your stuff local. Let's really, because a lot of their brands are local names. People downstate wouldn't even know what Cal Kushka is. It doesn't make sense to them, but people up here get it. And Dune Grass, and they're very local. They're Traverse City boys, and they really support all their local things. They do coat drives, they do all kinds of stuff, and I have nothing but love for those guys. They're really amazing. So, that's what I try to do. So anyone that's looking to meet people or looking to understand the market, or even understand their own inventory, we're willing to take on some more people. We have a great sales team. I'd love to sell. Even if you have your own sales force, you may just need help moving certain things, or you're looking for certain things, And at the end of the day, I'm a relationship guy. If I never sold anything for Tom or sold anything to Tom in my life, or even you, Ryan, I'll be your brothers forever. So I just really love meeting people and getting to know people, because you never know. You never know who you could help.
Yeah, that's great, and I concur with the Dune Grass guys, and that's a great fit. Real Leaf and Dune Grass. Redemption's been in their stores for a while, and just really well run, and it's cool being local up there, and they're all about the northern Michigan, so really cool. Ran out of time today. I wanted to give Tom and Kevin and Jason a chance to say goodbye, so Kevin, take it away.
Yeah, Jason, sorry I got in a little bit late with you guys, but it was good chatting with you, good meeting you face to face, and appreciate you coming on the show and your insight on the market. It's invaluable. So thanks again for coming on, and have a good new year, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin.
Tom?
Hey, man, you're sitting right over there. What can I say? After this, we're going to smoke some mac and cheese, and we're going to hang out and wish you guys were here. And, it's always great to talk to you, man. We could do this all day long, and we probably will.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
Any parting thoughts, Jason?
No, just I love it. I really appreciate you guys having me on. I know it was kind of a flash thing, but if you ever need me on again, I have hours of this stuff. So once again, have a blessed 2022. You guys are amazing, and this year is going to be great. And I see Michigan taking a turn, and you're going to start seeing some really solid Michigan brands going forward, because all you guys out there branding right now, you're going to start seeing your stuff getting staples in these stores. And I'm really excited to see what happens over the next 4 years.
We appreciate that. It was great having you on, and we love to talk about the market. So maybe we will have to do some quarterly updates, and we're willing to improve the show any chance we get. So thanks for being on. If anyone wants to get a hold of with Crockett, please do. We've known each other for a while and bounced a lot of ideas, and looking forward to being back up at the MICIA Summer Annual as well. So with that, we'll see everybody next week.
Adios.